Okay, so I guess we're gonna start this panel. I actually wanted to go through the bios because I kept worrying everyone to send me bios, but we don't have the time. So we'll just definitely jump into the discussions. We've heard from the pioneering generation, we've heard from the current generation. So my question now is gonna be, do you think that the current movement of feminism engages enough with the pioneering movements of feminism? Do we know their struggles? Like, for instance, it was this year I particularly heard about the serial killings and how women stood for that. It was only this year, you know, and I call myself a feminist, but I hadn't engaged with that. What do you think?
Okay. The short answer is no. And I think there are lots of reasons why that's the case. Can you guys hear me okay? Because the mic is a bit low. I think that perhaps one, I mean, if we think about the context of Ghana specifically, right? I believe that we live in a kind of gerontocratic society, which basically means that old people rule it, or older people rule it, right? And I think that that creates a kind of divide, unfortunately, between younger people's activism and older people's activism. I think that perhaps we also don't always know where to go to find this history, you know. I know for myself, I don't know enough about Ghanaian feminist history, and that's a shame. And I think that it's something we need to work on. That's my short answer.
Anyone else?
Okay, I also don't think that the two are talking. And I think that it's very important to build bridges, because most of us, well, at least speaking for myself, I learned a lot from people who are ahead of me. You heard what Anita Noye indicated, that those of us who happen to be lawyers, we came to meet people like Professor Kwenyehia, Auntie Dorcas, and they were using their knowledge to promote women's rights. And we've learned a lot as far as several issues are concerned. So I think that the young generation, they are doing their own research, have a lot of issues to raise, but there's a need to link up with some of the older, or what? Yeah. So that some of the information they've gathered, the knowledge they've gathered, will find a way in which it would be more useful to the ordinary person. Remember, we're doing all this work not for ourselves. As we gain more knowledge, as we interrogated issues and know what needs to be done to make the life of other women much better. We need to be able to share information to move the process forward.
Now you want to speak.
Because I think it's an issue of centering. I mean, I'm appalled actually. Because lettered younger feminists say, maybe they'll quote Gloria Steinem or they'll quote Audre Lorde. Why the assumption that there aren't Ghanaian feminists to quote, that there isn't Ghanaian research? So and Prof gave us the names. So that's what I find it disturbing that you say you don't know. Because it's not like the information is hidden. It's not hidden. So I would fault the younger generation for not looking. And it's about not centering ourselves. Because I don't think the older generation has to do anything more. If you are lettered and they are lettered, they've written, they've done their research, they have lived their life's experiences, they've made choices. So it comes from the assumption that there aren't any, and I don't know where people get that assumption from. It's a dangerous assumption. So hopefully today, a lot of names were mentioned from Hannah Kujo, Mabel Madam Dampa, and all the professors that we have, Mansapra, Prof herself, a lot of people. So it's dangerous for you to have this assumption that people haven't done this work, and that you can't find the information. It is there. Google.
Yes, Google is our friend. And I'll just to sort of clarify my point. It's fair. So I think that there's a way in which, again, like our movements have been quite separate, and so yes, I can Google and find certain information. information. I'm an academic myself, so when it comes to academic feminism, absolutely, right? But the history of Ghanaian feminism, even the state of where Ghanaian feminism is today, where those older pioneering generation feminists are today, I feel that there's still a source of disconnect. And I don't know that it's necessarily just because we aren't looking. I think that there's also something about the kinds of spaces that exist for quote-unquote pioneering feminist activism that perhaps aren't always as open to younger generation feminists.
My observation, particularly from the conversations we've had through the evening, is that there is some struggle with the way the new group of feminists have been formed. For those of us who are being referred to as the bridge group, we got the benefit of people deliberately mobilizing us and giving us trainings and giving us training. I mean, we spent times in residential workshops organized by the ACT Foundation. We had all the women speaking here this morning were part of our trainings, and they exposed us to the history, they taught us the mobilizing strategies. There was so much work that was done with us that the responsibility was not all on us to go find them and liaise with them. They reached out. Maybe the pioneers did a lot more work than the bridging generation is doing. And this is an opportunity for all of us to tune in and say what can be done. That I think, and then I think the new generation should not be satisfied with the visibility that they are getting, because that will be exhausted at a point. The social media conversation would end, and then what next? Have we achieved our aim? So whilst the iron is getting hot, we should be getting ready to strike. Where do we strike, and how do we strike? This is an opportunity that has been created, and I think it's a great one. And we shouldn't have just conversations and leave, but then how do we work around identifying? And then we think the pioneer group, even though they may feel tired, and they don't look tired, should continue to support. So continue to support the kind of trainings we had back then, very, very thorough. Very thorough. You came out feeling very good and very strengthened. I remember after our training, I went for a workshop. Then it had nothing to do with gender and women. I think it was a meeting for Gapford, or it was an organization mobilizing around NGO work. And as soon as everybody was introducing themselves and their organization, when I stood up, I said, my name is Diana Odo, I'm a feminist. And everybody was shocked, because I had just come from some new realization, and I felt finally there was a definition and identity to what I felt. And I began to tell everybody. What happened at coffee break? An elderly senior woman called me and said, today, how did you introduce yourself? I said, I'm a feminist. It's like, do you understand what that means? I said, yes. What does it mean? I went through all the theories and practicals of it. And she said, do you know feminists are not liked in the world around? I said, is that so? But are there more feminists in the world? She said, there are. And I said, has anything happened to them? She said, they are not liked. And I said, well, that is not a disincentive enough. I would like to be a feminist. And I continued, but strangely, as I grew older, before I realized, I began to call myself a gender activist. But today, and for the whole year, I have gone back to my initial identity. I am a feminist.
So would you say then it's easier in a sense to find examples of academic feminism versus, I don't know, versus on the ground, like the woman who would protect her child from her husband who wants her child to get married at the age of 12, but has not been documented in any of our literature. And when they were teaching me the independent struggle in social studies class, in class 6, they mentioned the big 6, they never mentioned any women, you know. So, I mean, would you say it's easier to find that kind of feminist history and that the everyday acts of feminism, which is on the ground, you know, which is not as elitist or as classist, but is still feminism, is actually the ground and basis for it, is more difficult to find and to give praiseworthy notice to? Anyone can take this.
Well, I mean, I think that in terms of, you know, who you're referring to, as in that woman with a daughter who perhaps wants to train the daughter in a feminist way. I mean, I'm not sure about how relevant academic knowledge would be to search for this. And I think that's why activists and academics need to work together. So then, as an activist, you are informed by academic research, in advocacy and all the wonderful jobs that the professors have done. And then, as we, as activists, as we go to the communities, then we can articulate in the languages that those people can understand. So I'm not sure whether access to academic information or feminist, discourse or academic discourse is very important to, let's say, the day-to-day person who intends to source that, knowledge. So I think different people, maybe for us, for some of us, we need to be able to, get schooled and educated in feminist, discourses. But as to whether that same end needs to be met for the ordinary person, I think perhaps a different access route to sourcing that knowledge should be explored.
Do you need academic feminism to be a feminist?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And I'm coming from a place where I work on a daily basis on certain issues that doesn't necessarily get rooted in the academics. And so it may be a shame that we may not have the historical understanding of, say, African feminists. I don't think I even have much understanding of non-African feminists, but I think the importance is what you use academics to, what do you use that academic for, academic information to what end? And for me, academic information or research or data helps me sell my story. And that's really what it's about. And I don't think academics should stand alone as a solution in itself. Academics should be used as some sort of catalyst to arrive at the goal that you're trying to reach. And so, so I don't really understand the need for a feminist to have, well, it's great, as again, it backs your selling of your issue, but I think this theory that you must have a deep-rooted understanding in, or some sort of academic backgrounds to have this fight, I think is quite flawed.
Going back to your question about whether it was easy to spot an intellectual feminist, yes, it's an issue of looking, and it's also an issue of getting bogged down in labels, which I love labels, and semantics. I mean, it's not possible for Ghanaian women to have made it this far without some feminist meanings across all our families. In my maternal family, we make very bad wives. Or we don't marry at all. Because nobody told me, this is how you cook for a man. No. And I'm talking about in the village, my grandmother never said. So, and what are market women, except women who have carried this economy, carried Ghana and their families. So we have to make sure we see, because if we don't see, then we will not be inclusive. It's very, very important. It's very important that we are not bogged down in just spotting certain kinds of things and ignoring how Ghanaian women have been, navigating Ghana in patriarchy all this time. So it's very easy for me to spot. So you have to this is an issue of, I come back to centering. You have to center. This is not a foreign concept. A lot of the things, in Fanti, there's a saying, papa. But people are sitting on social media saying divorce is taboo. I don't understand that. So it's an issue of centering and seeing and looking, and the fact that the conversations we have about Ghanaian women and where they are now must catch up to the reality of the lives that they are living. There's like a gap. When that other group, what are they called? Those that will remain nameless. When they listed the things they were going to do to men and for men, I couldn't identify a single Ghanaian woman I knew who fits that description, and I'm talking about my entire family. So Some of them are in 5 villages. I couldn't identify the link them, the what. I don't know who these people are. So we have to make sure that as feminists, or those of us who also believe in theory, that the conversation catches up. And it is very important because, again, going back to the pace setters, the pace setters are good at helping you bridge the gap.
Yeah, sorry. I think that's, you need both. You need both the academic as well as the activist. And I think that it's also, about time that we started documenting people's experiences. Okay? I know, for instance, for me, I grew up with my grandparents as well. And my grandmother, there were 2 of us, 3 of us, 2 boys and myself. When I was being taught how to cook, my brothers also being taught how to cook. She would share house chores, both the boys and the girls. Apart from us, there are other people who are always being prepared. So for me, I grew up also knowing that you could do anything. There were no limits. My aunties, etc., they could study any course they wanted. And this pressure about marriage wasn't an issue for me. Okay? So I think that there are other people to research experiences. It's about time that we document it. And maybe some of the younger generation should be listening more to some of the older generation and start documenting. Because we have feminists, like I said, as far back. My grandmother's grandmother herself was educated, and therefore there was this whole line of very liberated women. Yes, she married a prime minister, so maybe she got talked about a little bit. But she allowed, there were no limits, there were no barriers, as far as I was concerned. So I think that we really need to document things. And then think about knowledge is also very important because I'm sure that there's some people here who may not have had higher studies and therefore don't know much about the different categories of feminism that we have, the radical ones, etc. So the knowledge about what feminism is all about is also very important. So it's very important for people to equip themselves with enough information so that when they are having dialogues, they know what they're talking about.
All right, so I want to jump into another leg of this conversation of bridging the gap in the feminist movement. What has been the Ghanaian feminist language when it comes to LGBTQI plus women in the older generation and in the current generation? What have we done about those issues? Anyone can take it.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer for that, but I'll take it from my own personal experience. I grew up in a very liberal family, and I use liberal in a very liberal sense. I'm also Fanti. I grew up in as you know, Fanti women can be quite, there in terms of opinionated and they ruled their households. I think it was Professor Akosia who alluded to the CVP movement and how these women were able to, get their voices heard, and even some became, ministers and members of parliament. And I grew up with that, message in my household because one of my great aunts was, one of these women who became one of the first women MPs in Ghana. So I grew up with this sense of women in my family always achieving. And I never really understood that there were barriers for women. And so I left Ghana at a very early age. I was maybe 10. And I recently came back several years back. I went through a liberal arts education. I was a gay rights activist. I understood the nuances of sexuality to the extent that Ghanaians didn't. And I really struggled with understanding at a very, even in my early 20s, you may think I'm still in my 20s, I'm 36. Even in my early 20s, I really didn't understand what the issues were. For me, if one person loved another person or one person felt a certain way, whether you felt it was natural or not, for me, there was no issue, because if it's an issue of consenting adults, then consenting adults can pretty much do what they like. So I grew up with that understanding, and again, I was in a liberal arts setting in the U.S. where these issues were constantly discussed and debated. And through that period as well, I also became religiously liberated in the sense that I started to question the underpinnings of my life in terms of my religious understanding, right? I don't think, like I said, in my family, it was never a matter of you have to go to church or you have to believe in certain things, but I always felt that being a person who always questions things, I always felt that it was incumbent on me to seek more information as to why I believe what I believe. And so I took that journey and I came out the other side thinking, well, I don't think I can call myself a Christian because I truly do not believe this information that I've been given. So coming back to Ghana with that load of not holding these values or these religious values that everybody expected of you to hold, knowing that my family really could care less what I believe, also understanding that I knew that sexuality was so nuanced and that there wasn't any clear-cut understanding. One of my aunts is a plastic surgeon, and I think she even helped me understand that issue even further. I asked her, what do you think about this whole gay thing? Are people really born? As a doctor, can you tell me if people are really born homosexual? And she said, well, I can tell you from my experience that I've helped bring babies into this world that are sexually ambiguous. And that formed her understanding of sexuality, and that conversation also helped me form my understanding. So I struggle in this society, especially when we talk about these, not only religion, but also when we talk about sexuality, because I feel like we're miles behind. And I'm so glad you asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, what are we doing? What's the feminist movement? You hear stories. Last 3-4 weeks, we heard about a gay man who was lured and beaten up. And this is so common, like every other week you hear those stories, but then people are afraid to touch that. What have feminists done in the past? What are feminists doing today?
My observation of how feminists have reacted to this subject, the LGBT issue, has been that it's been very difficult, like political leadership, unlike the religious, the Christian environment that have made their position clear, like political leadership. I don't think, and I may be wrong, my observation may be wrong, but I don't think the feminist movement have said outright that we support these groups of people. But what the movement I have observed has done have made statements and supported in the pursuit of their rights as human beings. So women who were in same-sex women who were in relationships who were suffering abuse could get help from all the NGOs and the feminist groups that existed who were supporting any woman in a relationship who was struggling. They've talked about the rights of these people to their tenancy rights and everything else. So in as much as there has not been an open declaration of the Ghana feminist movement on what we stand for when it comes to LGBT, there has been that support. It may be nuanced, it may be hidden, but that position on issues of rights, on issues of prevention of violation and discrimination to them because of what they believe in has been clear from the feminists, at least to lesbians. So that is my observation. The new generation will step it a notch up. I suspect that will be a struggle to reach a consensus, and I'm being frank, because of the positions we hold coming from our religious and cultural beliefs. The same sources that we are struggling to liberate women from are the same sources that are feeding into our reaction to LGBT community. However, it looks like the feminism movement is ahead, so the issues are more visible, a lot more tolerated than that of the LGBT. But I don't think the feminist movement have turned their back on that particular community in Ghana.
Avoiding it.
Yeah, I think we're completely avoiding LGBT issues in the feminist movement in Ghana. And I agree with you that it's absolutely a very controversial topic, right? And so there are feminists who are very religious who feel that, you know, maybe it's against their religion, and so they don't know how to deal with it, right? But for me, I feel that LGBT activism and feminist activism, I think they're natural allies, you know? Because for me, what queer activism does is that it challenges our understanding of gender. It challenges our understanding of sexuality, right? This is what feminism is doing, right? We are natural allies. So for the life of me, I don't understand why we don't, even on an intellectual level, understand that these movements are connected, right? There are lots of LGBT women within the feminist movement. Unfortunately, they're not able to be open, they're not able to be out, right? Because of the homophobia that exists. So yeah, I'd say that we're definitely not doing enough, and we're not having enough of the conversations. Kina?
I second what she's saying. I often wonder why the differences like exist between, say, Kenya and Ghana. I ponder about it a lot. My godfather was gay, he was Kenyan. Yeah. So, and we are not doing enough. And the worrying thing is, I don't think that the younger generation of feminists are embracing enough publicly. What do we have to fear? Just some backlash. Are we not used to backlash?
There's more than that when it comes to
What is the
LGBT
point of being an ally?
death threats.
Are we going to advocate for certain groups of women and leave other groups of women? I don't understand. It's just some backlash. That's all. Nobody died from backlash. But gay people and lesbian women are dying in Ghana because of the sexuality choices they have made. We're not dying. So somebody is going to say you support gay rights, and then they're going to tell you it's un-African. Well, so what? So no, we have to be braver than this, because then we create classes for ourselves. This one is deserving of your support. Frankly, I support trans women. Because the way I see it, if trans women exist, I am free. And I want to be free from the patriarchy. So if trans women exist, I am free. If Ghanaian women are allowed to say, I don't want to have a child, I am free. So if we, those of us who are a bit more privileged and have platforms, are going to be scared to just open our mouths and support people, and don't allow yourself to get bogged down in whether it's natural or not. Who the hell knows what natural is? We use cell phones. Then we are, and it's me, dear, it bothers me. My feminist struggle is how exclusive we are. I mean, we haven't even come to the class issues. So we are just going to have to do a whole better thing at being feminist. Because I don't want other classes of women, because then I'm not free. Because what somebody is saying is that a Ghanaian woman doesn't have the right to be lesbian. And what we are saying is that women are entitled to their choices. So if somebody's path is blocked, my path is blocked.
I'm going to attempt to sort of analyze, the focus, sort of the sites for advocacy. I mean, if you take Pepperdam Ministries, for instance, we have identified the areas that we would like to focus on. So, sexual abuse and then all of that. In advocating for those, because there are women who are trans, let's say LGBT, we can, yes, Q. The list is endless. In your analysis to sort of advocate for the issues, there can be that inclusivity. But as to whether your focus of advocacy is to advocate that women, for those rights as a sole purpose. I think there has to be some distinction between that, because every organization has a focus. So the ACT Foundation has one, WILDA, all of that. But in our bid to advocate, we should have all the indicators sort of drill down to the various sort of, I think there is a word for it, drill down to the different parts of the people who we advocating for. So then, in terms of gender rights, or let's say women's rights, right, focusing on women, there are women who are trans, there are women who are this, there are women who are that. And so we can factor that in. But as to whether your focus is necessarily, advocating that, such women should exist or not exist, or the debate about is it natural or not natural, I think there has to be a distinction around that. And I hope I didn't run into complications with that. I hope I'm very clear.
No, so I think what the issue lies, and from my standpoint, is, when you are met with, I'm not saying you as in, when we as feminists in Ghana are met with homophobia, we don't fight back as vigorously as we do when we're met with patriarchal issues. So I think that's really where the issue lies. And to be honest, there's also an element of homophobia in feminist movements in Ghana, and I think that's also something that has been conveniently avoided to make peace with the fact that that's also another civil rights effort or human rights effort. So I think that's really.
What I want to say is that you are entitled to your position, but listening to you, it's like how the men go, well, we can speak for the women. We don't think we need a women's movement. We will advocate for them. The issues that we deal with also affect Ghanaian women. No. If we don't see people, we don't see their issues. So me, I'm begging you. It's not something you have to take on. No. I'm just saying. But if we continue to say the things that we advocate for touches the lives of gay people, queer people, then that's okay. No, because they suffer an added level, the whole intersectional thing. They have something. And what I'm trying to impress, and this can be a longer conversation, is that we've done that for so long. And when we do that in Ghana, it benefits the status quo, which is just horrible. And again, it's about women's choices. So that's what I'm saying. This can be a longer conversation.
This can go on, but yeah, thank you very much for your answers. We don't have much time, so I'm going to just kind of wrap this up with these two questions. There was this powerful image in the Pacesetters panel discussion where I think it was Naya Nita who spoke about how they were at a rally and Auntie Dorcas actually told her to move inside to protect her. What does that say then about today about support systems? How are we going to create support systems for the older generation? How is the older generation who's already gone through some of these things, some of the things that we are fighting today, we haven't gone through because they've done it for us. So how are they also going to create support systems for us? Pepperdam holding this here today has just been powerful. In a sense, there's a support system here with all these feminists sitting here today. But bridging that gap, like how are we going to create concrete support systems for feminists? We see how Pepperdam is slammed. We see how they slam Ebony, how they slam Rashida Black Beauty, and you see traditional media on social media, and it's not everyone who can go through that and come out the same. So how do we create support systems?
I think we need to create more platforms to share. Today's program, for instance, is an example of where we are all here together sharing. So build actual linkages in terms of how we can move some of the issues that are brought up to another level, whether to the policy level or whatever. So I think that we should come up with more creative ways, come up with more platforms to talk, to dialogue, and to identify issues we can work on together to move a step forward.
So, in my line of work, I founded an organization that looks to increase the number of women in boardrooms across the African region. Now, this was founded about 2 years ago, and we so far built a database of nearly 300 women across the continent, really senior level. And so, I think what's always missing is when we're talking about women empowerment, we also think that women who've reached like CEO or C-suite are not empowered in some way. There are lots of structures at the top that also prevent women from progressing or even getting to the board level. The figure is 5% of all the board CEO seats across the continent. Only 5% are held by women. The figure is, of all the board seats across the continent, only 14% are held by women. So there's an issue not just at the bottom, but there's also an issue with the pipeline and building your way up. And so in terms of how we bring women together and sort of be our sisters keepers, so to speak, our platform is engaged in getting these women to communicate with each other. I mean, this week alone, I've had conversations with women in Egypt and Morocco, and every time we talk about what we do, the resounding theme that we hear is, oh my gosh, you're bringing together women across the continent. We have tried to do this within our own setting, and it's great. We support each other at that senior level within our own context, but it's an amazing thing that we can come together as women across the African region and learn from each other's experiences and learn from each other's career goals. So from my perspective, that's what I think there should be more of. I think there's a lot of support systems that are building out for women who may have be poverty-stricken or may require some assistance from an angle where they're not empowered economically. But I think there's very little support for women at the top. Even when we started doing this, and every time we went to a social impact investor to consider the work we're doing to fund it, almost always we heard we only support poor women in Africa. And that was really tough. I mean, every single entity, you name it, Ford Foundation, Gates, all these, we only support poor women in Africa. And I said, well, do you think women who have jobs don't need empowerment? So these are some of the narratives, and as we talk about intersectionalities as well, these are some of the narratives that I think as feminist movement, we also have to understand the broad spectrum of women, and that, just because you think you sit in an office with a nice suit, doesn't mean that there are structures within that context that are keeping you from reaching your apex.
You know what, can I open it up to the audience now? But we'll come round for a final point of view on everything before we go, so you definitely have a chance to address anything else.
My name is Nanaya, and I belong to the Bridge Group, and went through Angela's human rights training program, which was extremely helpful for me as a person at the stage of life I was in. I'm saying this because I think that every age has its strategy. At the moment, social media is achieving huge success. In fact, I got to hear about Pepedem on social media and found them, reached out to them, and it's making a lot of impact. I don't think as a bridge in terms of the old group and the new group, or in terms of the pacesetters and the new group, we should worry too much about whether we are reaching out enough or not. The fact of the matter is, at this time in our history, this is what we need. They say in the Bible about Esther, a time like this. This is why Pepedem was created, to make the impact they need. And I see a lot of young women here. I think the most important lesson I learned about 20 years ago was the fact that we need to live it as human beings feminism has to be lived. It has to change your life personally. And the thing about feminism and the support groups is sometimes you might be sinking. All you need is somebody to show you the spots, and it can change your life. It has changed mine.
Thank you. I think there's a question over here, please. There's a question here.
My name is Maoli, and just to touch on the issue of the disconnects that we talked about in the various panels, and to share my own experience on that feminist journey. I've had the privilege to sit in some really good classrooms, conferences, workshops, but some of the most important things I've learned that continue to help me as an activist in the feminist space were not in these kinds of settings. I remember when I was younger, Auntie Pechua used to organize this lunch that turns into dinner at her house. And I was very young, I didn't know much about feminism and all that, but usually they would invite me. And I didn't understand most of what they were saying, but I found it interesting. Years later, I was sitting in a law school at Columbia gender justice class, and some of those issues were coming up. And I remember some of the things they said, and I was really like, wow, you are very smart. The point I'm making is that we need to go beyond some of these International Women's Day, British Council, hotel, conference room meetings and explore other venues and spaces. Because if you are sitting at the table with some of the speakers that we've had, the pace setters, the kind of conversations that happen in those settings, you are not going to hear it with the media and the microphones here. So let's explore. Let's give ourselves the chance to learn. I engaged with some of the new feminist groups, and they are thinking of starting things that have been in existence instead of building on things that are already in existence. Probably because they don't know about them. So you also have to invest in understanding the context and the history and things that are happening so that you are building on some of those things instead of, re-engineering. And so just to encourage us to try to fix that disconnect between the various generations. And it should be a shared responsibility.
Thank you. Question here? There's a question here.
I think it's already great that we've been able to gather here as women to discuss issues that concern us. But I feel like once we're here, let's deal with the things we are trying to avoid, or we're trying to keep away in some nice place. I've noticed that the older generation, the pace setters, call themselves women empowerment activists or something like that. And then we touch on specific issues. We're talking about...
No, they call themselves feminists. So.
Feminists?
Yeah.
Oh, great. And feminists is fine. So, but we touch on certain issues, girl child education, those, the ones we're used to. And then when it comes to the abortion rights, I saw Akosia try to mention something about Ebony's lifestyle and such like that. We try to go away from that because we have certain views that contradict what the new school is trying to get across. So since we're here, can we address some of these issues? What are we ready to do from here? Rather than keep having these conversations over and over, we can do that. But what are we willing to do? We have ministers of state making rather interesting comments about rape and about women outfits and such. What are we going to do about it? Can we stop talking and actually do something now? Thank you.
Thank you, Ramatu. And well, I believe we've spoken a lot, and it's all boiled down to women. But I believe sometimes when you train a mind to think a certain way, it's better than when you want to change that mindset. Okay, what I'm trying to say is we create these things for people to fit in, whereas let's take it for, you want more women in boardrooms, You create that atmosphere for them, but they're afraid to step in there because that mindset is still there, that they have that fear holding them back. So how do we build up such mindsets from infancy? You tell a child, you are not supposed to do this, it sticks. Unless that child has something way bigger than him to fight that whatever he or she feels he has been told is wrong. So why not get down to the grassroots? Why not build up mindsets? I don't see people coming to, I'm a teacher actually, I don't see people coming to the classrooms, especially government schools and all that, talking to them. We don't have things in our curriculum teaching these children what to hold, what to believe, what to see, what they can do. And then when they grow up, they come to this and then they are stuck. So if we can address that, I think it will help us.
All right. So panelists, you've got a big job on you, and all of you have to answer. I'll start from Kena or end this. People want to know, give us concrete solutions, movement building, education, what are we going to do to solve all the various problems feminism tries to solve while being intersectional? You know, religious hegemony, LGBTQI, all of these things.
Well, in the previous panel, in fact, Akosi and I were talking about one of the differences being, and I think Efia brought a question about achievements and things like that. So sooner or later, younger feminists are going to confront the issue of power. How to bring it down, the power that is not in your favor, and how to get the power. Because it is not all going to be, we're not going to change the lives of the majority of Ghanaian women making personal choices, which are very important. So sooner or later, we hope sooner, we are going to have to talk about organizing, and this is what the PaySetters have. There's lots of documentations about that. So sooner or later, you are going to have to confront power, because every personal choice that you make, there's a barrier to that somewhere, and it has to do with power. Because everything about Ghana right now is about giving the maximum power to men everywhere. So we are not going to get over without talking about power. And I think that's, and once we start to look at power and we start to be inclusive, then we are going to broaden things out a bit. It's a worry really that we shouldn't be exclusionist. We should be inclusive. And I like the teacher, because that is, for me, I always say that I envy political parties in Ghana and churches. Because they can get to Ghanaians wherever they are. And that's where I think feminism should be. So maybe we need to hire some political party organizers and say, here, today go to here, and then go here, and then say this. Because we need to be in that classroom. Because we need to be there. And we need to also look at, textbooks from a feminist angle, because what is in the textbook is atrocious and anti-women, anti-Ghana. So I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we are going to have to look at power and some I don't want to say real issues, the issues are real, but other issues that are plaguing Ghanaian women, like property rights, access to land, workplace harassment, equal pay, and poverty.
So the question is around.
So we want, basically, just wrapping it up, what's your idea of a feminist future? And everyone keeps asking for concrete solutions. What should we do?
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, that's a big question to answer in 30 seconds. But I think I'll just take this time to plug YFG. So I'm part of a...
I've been told to tell you it's all 30 seconds each.
Okay, I'll be quick. So I'm part of a feminist collective called the Young Feminist Gathering. We meet once a month at the AWDF house. Come check us out. That's where we're working on building different futures, thinking about feminist futures for young women and for all of Ghanaians. Thank you.
Power. It's a great support system.
All right. What we should do, first, I want to applaud the Pepedem Ministries. My main point is don't give up. The backlash, You survive the first phase, that heavy one. You're going to survive so many more. The numbers are going to grow. Lots more young people are going to identify as feminists, much more than the British. We are the Honeywell group. The Honeywell group say they are best, but it looks like people are doing better. Don't give up at all, but most importantly, our seniors, the pace setters, old school, whatever name you give them, I'm not sure they mind. They have demonstrated their commitment to this process by being here. All of them who don't have other. Thank you. Thank you for clapping for them. They are here. You know their ages, you know how long they've done this. Some of them have done this longer than our age. But they're here today, so don't feel tired on their behalf. Don't let them take a break. Be in touch with them and let them show the way. You know, the way the presidents arrived, it shook the ground. People have criticized the fact that you entered through the wrong door. It doesn't matter, you are in the hall anyway. I think how we can get better is to re-strategize, and you can do that only by talking to those who went through the experience already. So be in touch with them. They are willing, they are mothers, they are aunties, they are friends, they are there. Most of them are retired, you know, so it makes it even better. So visit them in their homes, out of the face of the camera, and let us get strategy. I have said that the social media strategy looks good, but it will get exhausted. Before then, let us be combat ready. This battle is on and it's on.
Thank you.
So, in terms of solutions, and I'm going to be very politically controversial. So, our president is supposedly the AU gender champion. Okay. So, of all the political appointments that he can make himself, why are women not 50-50? That's one. Secondly, why don't we have a bill out in Parliament that sets a quota for the number of women represented in Parliament? That's two. Thirdly, he set up an organization called JDIA as on the back of his appointment as AU Gender Champion. There was a recent event to launch JDIA where pretty much an award was provided to a bunch of businessmen, and there was no woman given an award. I mean, and nothing was said. I mean, nobody made a point that this was just atrocious and it's ridiculous. And I know I'm going to get flack for this, but it's wrong. Don't claim to set up a gender movement if you're not even going to consider the very basis of that, the underpinnings of why you're doing what you're doing. And these awards were also supposedly given to men who were advanced in gender in business. I can guarantee you that none of them on the list were advanced in gender in business. So for me, those are real concrete steps that are easily done because the president has the bully pulpit. He has the power to make a difference, and there's a claim to being a feminist, or there's a claim to championing the cause of women, and if that's the claim, we need to take it on board. I mean, Rwanda has 60% women in parliament. South Africa is stepping up in terms of women's leadership and representation. Kenya has similar quotas. What is Ghana doing? You're the gender champion. Do something. That's my solution.
I think that the fight for gender equality has been there for a while, and it will continue on. We all work in different spheres. On the issue she's talking about, I think some of us in this room have worked towards putting together an affirmative action bill, and I'm hoping that it will soon be in Parliament, and we should all continue to support a very positive one. So my message is that we work in different spheres. The academicians are there, they are doing their work. We should continue doing it and pushing, the theories when it comes to feminism. The activists are there. Somebody asked about people going to the villages. I think that when I joined FIDA in 1989, they were crossing, using canoes to go to places to do a legal literacy, etc. They gathered information to push for the law to ban trocosi. A lot of work has gone on. The issue of abortion came up. Originally in our criminal law, abortion was sort of a no-no. With advocacy and work on policy that was done, the law was changed to make it possible to have an abortion under 3 different circumstances. I know that we don't have time, so we can't go into that. So there's a lot of work going on. Those who are working on policy should continue. And then the younger ones, as has been indicated, let's try to build bridges. Apart from such formal settings, you can also meet in smaller groups to learn more about what is going on, what can be done, and how those of us in the older generation can help you to push some of the thoughts and ideas you have forward. Thank you.
So for me, I think that I just want to, sort of vision cast, so what next? And with that, I would say that we need to step back and ask ourselves the question, how far are we willing to go to bring transformation? To what extent, can we bring transformation? And if we can measure or sort of cast our mind to the kind of transformation that we wish to effect in the society, then we would be able to amass, sort of, I don't want to use missiles here, but, put together the tools that would be needed to implement that. And I think the church is very important. It speaks to a certain human motivation for people to do things. The kind of things that people get to do when told by, preachers or in the church space. People can go to a very, whatever extent. So I think that in exploring new ways to sort of build coalitions and effect advocacy and all that, we should look at the church. Because it looks to me that it's sort of a prime influence in the Guinean life.
Alrighty, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen, your panel. Huge round of applause for them. Thank you.